So I'm Derek Lomas, and I'm with the Playpower Foundation, and we're producing open source learning games that run on these existing $10 computers. They're 8-bit, and they're available in marketplaces around the world, from Brazil, China, India, Pakistan. And we're building a community of people who are producing games, academics who are researching games, and we're packaging up all this learning game design pedagogy and curriculum to introduce to university professors around the world. We're using a platform that's affordable enough even to people who make less than $3,000 a year. There's 4 billion people who make less than $3,000 a year. And we're building a community around creating games for those people. It's a platform that's been around for about 25 years, but the patents have expired because patents have a 20-year term. And so now the hardware itself is in the public domain. The processor that was in this computer was used in the Nintendo Entertainment System as well as the Apple II in America. And from my personal experience, I grew up with Apple II games, played Oregon Trail and Lemonade Stand, Number Munchers, and so I came from the perspective that 8-bit games might be simple, but they can still be very powerful. And just because it's an 8-bit game doesn't mean that it's obsolete. So if you're using the most recent version of Windows Vista, you can still play Mario Brothers, and it's still a really fun game. Many of the early computers that came out in America hooked up to the television and had basic programming on them. And a lot of people learned to program using these simple 8-bit computers. The version of BASIC that's on this computer is specifically designed to let kids program games. And there's this really interesting phenomenon that has happened in this country and I think happens all over the world, where kids get really hooked on playing video games, and it really motivates them to learn to program. They get totally addicted to games, and they have to learn how to make them. And actually, a couple of the people who are working on our project now actually originally learned to program using these machines. So this comes with a version of BASIC that lets the kids who take this home learn to program their own video games. We're trying to use this platform in conjunction with high school teachers and middle school teachers to encourage their kids to design video games that are intended for use in developing countries. Because the 8-bit constraints are something that allow people to design simpler games that don't require huge teams of programmers. And because the kids are able to design games that address a real-world issue, they're able to learn a lot about the world and at the same time learn about the game development process. And so we're really excited about being able to engage students in the US in a design process that might eventually reach children learning in places that are much less privileged. We'd be very open to trying to create software that would function in the context of a computer lab, but the way that these are being distributed now is for home use. So we're trying to create games focused on home use. So for instance, we want to make games that reflect the fact that there's typically only one television in the household, and the father is typically the one who gets to control what's on it. So we're making these quiz games, like the type of games that you might see in a bar, where everyone's able to have sort of different domains of expertise. The kids might know more about certain questions, and the parents might know more about the others, but it gets the whole family engaged in a sort of intellectual activity. We've had to really consider the ethics of participating in this platform because we realize that although this might be marketed for educational purposes, the fact is that the kids are probably taking these homes and playing video games on them. And so we have to feel confident that we're promoting something that is actually going to be beneficial, which makes us really consider whether kids playing classic video games is beneficial. We tend to look at this very positively, that children who grow up playing classic games develop a certain kind of competence and expertise and confidence in themselves that even when they're faced with certain challenges, they're able to see themselves improve as the game progresses and share their sort of networks of knowledge with their friends who come over, for instance. And so we've thought a lot about the way that games facilitate social networking and networks of expertise within sort of youth communities. As to participatory learning, it's been more or less central to our thoughts on game development and community development. So, for instance, one of the ways that this project can not fail, even if we don't achieve our ultimate goals of introducing this software to millions of children, is that we've been able to engage college students, for instance, in learning certain computer science skills that they're learning anyway, but that they're able to apply those skills directly in a service learning context. So for students who are learning assembly coding, they're able to participate in this project by programming assembly to create learning games for children in developing countries. Similarly, we're trying to create local regional networks of open source developers who are able to produce games for their specific culture. So right now, video game production primarily takes place in the USA, Europe, and Japan. India invented chess, but there's not really many video games being innovated in India. So part of the goal of this project is to broaden the participation in the creation of video games as a cultural form, because it's a platform that can actually be afforded by the majority of the population in these countries.